Okay, good morning. There's a couple of people finishing up getting bagels back there, which is great. Observationally, a little lighter crowd this morning. We'll chalk that up to any number of reasons, but I'm glad that you all took the time to come down. It looked like there were a handful of people that are online as well, so that's always an option that I encourage. But my warning is that if I end up down here with 5 or 6 people, then we're going to cut off the live stream and make people come down to the room. So in any case, my name is Bob Leake. I'm the interim director for county assets. There's a couple of new faces in the room, I know. Who's here at this meeting for the first time? Okay. So I'm not going to have you stand up and introduce yourself, so I'll debunk that immediate reaction that you might have had. But I do want to share and just kind of reiterate what this meeting is or what this venue is, and it's a little different than I think what you may experience with other groups, other meetings around the county. So this is a monthly event. I hold it here 5, 6, 7 times out at Blanchard, which is where our facilities group is based a couple of times, and then we're going to do at least one out at the Yeon building where the fleet and records and archives groups are based. And this is a forum in which I usually have at least one thing that I want to share or talk through or facilitate a dialogue around. But it really is an opportunity for you all to ask me questions. There's no topic that's off limit. However, there may be some topics that require some follow-up. I'll do my best to answer them. I guess my guideline is if you have a question, one of those adages is if you have a question, somebody else probably also has that question. And so one of you needs to be courageous enough to ask that question. And then what we find is, oh yeah, that I was wondering about that, or thank you for asking that. I would also not limit your thoughts to things that are only DCA related or your team's related. You can ask those questions too. Like in my team, such and such is happening, or I'm curious about this, because that might provide a theme around things like change management or communication, or something that might be relevant to everyone. And so, given an opportunity to ask a question, please take advantage of that. We're going to go until about 5 minutes to 10. I want to respect everybody's time, give you a chance to get out of here. And frankly, I have a meeting that I need to get to at 10 o'clock as well. And so I'll keep an eye on the clock, and we'll make our way through that. I do have something that I'm going to talk about this morning, but before I launch into that, and I am going to let you all talk with each other on this topic, and it's around competencies. And the new competency model and the work that's being expected to be happening around that. And so I've got a little exercise that I want to work us through on that. And so that'll be the topic that I want to talk through. But what questions do you have? Rumors are always great. I love to know what might be out there that I don't know about. But what do you have? What would you like to know about? What questions do you have? What topics should I touch on? Brad? What is the status of killing the CIO position? Okay. I may reframe that question a little bit. But I'll talk through status of the leadership roles. No problem at all. Yep.
I think it's been asked in some versions in the past, but are there ongoing conversations about bringing a little even better alignment between facilities and IT in particular? We find in our group particularly often stepping on each other's toes, and we're doing what we can to try to avoid that. But customers are moving around. I know there's a MAC process, but they're just pieces that fall through the cracks. They have a different ticketing system. We have a different ticketing system.
Mm-hmm.
Duplicating, and I'm just curious if there's a conversation at some level about that.
Okay. Just to summarize for the microphone and the online folks, is there ongoing conversation about closer or better alignment between facilities and IT? And I do have some comments that I want to make around that, and maybe even put a challenge out there. So I'll kind of tee it up that way. Yeah.
I'd like to piggyback on that with thoughts of an IT position or something along those lines with integration with facilities and IoT and OT devices that are being more prevalent,
Yep.
or more integration with electronic services, et cetera.
Great. Yep. Good news there. That's an active conversation on the facility side of things. They have the same set of concerns, observations, and so forth. And so I can definitely make a few comments around that and maybe help to jumpstart through some expectation setting what we could do around that. So that addressing the Internet of Things, for those of you who don't know what that IoT acronym stands for. So I'm happy to talk through that a little bit. Okay. What else could I touch on this morning? Yeah.
What's the next big thing after Align?
Yeah, that's a good one. What's after Align? More Align? Yeah, I can talk through a little bit of that. Yeah. Okay.
It just seems like there was such a focus,
Right.
you know, and then now that, what comes next? Because I like having that nice, like, big focus.
Yeah, there's a couple of areas that we're thinking about. So, Patrick.
What outcomes do you expect from the all-staff meeting?
Okay. I was hoping somebody was going to ask about the all staff.
Laura and Tony are going to be around, so we have to get to another meeting around 9:30, but I'll just throw it out there for the benefit.
Yeah, no, that's good. If it wasn't asked, I was going to touch on it, so that's good. We'll talk a little bit about next week's all staff. Other questions, rumors, topics? Yeah, Michelle.
The data breach that happened, I think is there any more news on that?
Which one? They kind of happen pretty regularly. The ADVSD one?
Yeah.
Okay, yeah. I may ask Aaron or somebody else from security to provide a little bit additional detail. I know that we've closed the case, so we've gone through the mechanism by which we deal with these. But Aaron, if you want to think about how you could summarize it in a minute or two, I'll have you come up and do that. Okay. Okay. Yeah, Tony?
If you have time to get to it, we're hearing about some of the impacts that are being felt by the departments on this year's budget.
Mm-hmm.
I'm just curious, your perception of how severe that is and what that's entailing.
Yeah, so Tony's question was around impacts to budgets with the departments. It's been a little bit of a roller coaster ride, right? We did the constraints and all of that work, got the county's budget done. Because of the delays at the state level, there were decisions that were made that last weekend that have now had impacts to the county. And I know about a couple of those and what those impacts might be, and I can touch on those. But I think more is yet to come around what the full aspect of those impacts are. Oregon Health Authority just announced the awarding of the Continuing Care Organization, the CCO awards went out, I think it was yesterday, to 16 of the 19 organizations. Anyway, there's an online story around that. That's going to have an impact to us since we're part of that network of providing services to the public. So, yeah.
Maybe you can start us off with a joke.
Come on, Bob, I fed you one.
Yeah, you did. So I'll share a little personal component of that. So, one, you need to know yourself, right? You need to know what you're good at and what you're not good at. And there's certain things that I feel that I'm good at, and certain things that I'm continuing to learn how to be good at, like golf. One thing that I know I am not good at is having or showing any appreciation for jokes. I don't know if that's my Northern European DNA coming through, if that's because I'm, a 49-year-old male, my dad's influence, because he never liked jokes. I don't know what it was. So the long-winded way around that is you will rarely, if ever, hear me tell a joke. And I don't fake laughing when people are making jokes, but it might be on the edge of that. Because it's just one of those things. And I so admire people. It's like I have always wanted to learn how to play the guitar or the harmonica. And I own both of those. And I've tried it. I've watched the YouTube videos. My daughter picks up a ukulele from a friend of hers, and like 6 weeks later, she's playing 50 songs on a ukulele. And she did it all watching YouTube videos. And so it may be something up in here that the wiring just doesn't work anymore for me to learn something along those lines. So I'm not going to do a joke. I respect people that can do jokes, and I love going to comedy clubs and participating in that. And so I think I'll just leave it there. Thank you for feeding me a joke, though. I wrote back to you, right? LOL, right?
Not even capitalized.
Yeah, right. Yeah, it was. There you go. Right. I just fed into my brand. Right. A lowercase LOL. It's laughing out loud, but it's kind of like, yeah. So okay. So there you go. A little more insight about me. There you go. Do with that with what you would like. Okay. Any last things to touch on? If something comes up as we're talking, feel free to ask it as we make our way through. So let me start out with the competency related work. All of you got an email in the last week or so through the automated systems, except for the people that are on some probationary review period. I'm kind of looking over at the HR folks to make sure I get this right. But there was an email that was sent out from Workday that said it's time for you to do your planning and performance review work. And on the one hand, that's the new online system to do the PPRs. Automated tracking, reporting. It's meant to be ease of use. It's meant to replace hundreds of one-off versions of paper forms. It's required. It's already required in most of the contracts that we have. It's always been a part of, for exempt folks, management people like myself and others, to have a performance review annually. This is going to help us comply with that. It's built into the Workforce Equity Strategic Plan, the expectation that every employee has some type of development plan and performance review as part of the process. And so, those are great steps forward. It's very difficult to do that when you're sharing a Google Doc or a Word document, and you have hundreds of different flavors of people executing the process. So what the system has provided for us is a consistent way in order to do the work around planning and performance management, the tools, the templates, the reference materials, because all of that was available through links. There's a common site that has instructions. There are now trainings that are becoming available, both on how to use the tools, but also an increased number of training of what is planning and performance management. Because what we found through the employee survey now for years is there's a large group of employees, maybe have worked here for years or decades, who have inconsistently or maybe never had a planning and performance conversations with their supervisors. So I want to separate the system aspect of things from what I think is actually the harder part, right? That's I sometimes refer to things as a check the box exercise. Fill out the form, submit it, make sure that you're not on a tracking list, of not having done it. What is harder and more important is the conversation between an employee and their supervisor. And all of us have that two-way relationship. Everyone has a supervisor that they're accountable to. For me, it's Marisa. Then I have a group of people that are accountable to me, and they have groups of people that are accountable to them. And all the way through this, at some point, you're an employee talking to your supervisor. So that's a base premise now for around 6,000 or so people. The hard part is establishing the capability to have a conversation between an employee and a supervisor. And that takes effort and it takes time, and each of you bring your gifts to that conversation. The seriousness with which you take the opportunity to have a planning and performance discussion, the sense of how important that is to you as an employee, right? I'm still working on developing my own skills. It's really important to me that Marisa and I have rich conversations in an ongoing way about the things that I'm doing well, the things that she needs me to do, and the things that I could improve on. And we've spent, because I've reported to her now for a little over 12 months, we've spent the last 12 months working on how does that work? What's Marisa's style? What's my style? What are my needs as an employee? What's important to me? You know, feedback is important to me. Sometimes it hurts. Sometimes I get critical feedback. You know, Bob, you didn't quite have the impact I think you meant by the way that you communicated in this meeting or through that email or in that document. Oh, well, my intent was to communicate the following. Yeah, but the impact of how you did that had the following side effects, right? That's the dialogue that Marisa and I are having, because that's how I learn, that's how I grow. I'm willing to try, I'm willing to make mistakes, I'm willing to learn through that feedback loop. What I like even more is getting positive feedback. You know, you did a great job in that meeting, or that communication was really good, or it was really helpful to be proactively communicated to about this risk that's happening, say with the city of Portland and some effort that we might have going on with them. Because I have learned that I will keep doing the things that people tell me I do well, and I will change the things that I get feedback on that I don't do well. And in the absence of that dialogue, I'm not sure. So I'll just keep trying. Right? And so that's the work that Marisa and I have been doing, and I've only been a direct report to her for 12 months. And so we're still working on and building that relationship. We have a lot of new leaders within DCA across the organization. We also have a lot of longtime leaders across the organization. We have a lot of new employees. We have a lot of long-tenured employees. And so this navigation of creating this relationship between an employee and a supervisor is one where the two people involved have to do this work. And so that's the challenge number one. Number two, we have a desire as an organization, as the county, to be goal-oriented, to be focused on outcomes. That's clearly come through, right? There's the aspect of just showing up and working every day, but why is one way that question is asked. Why are we here? Okay, well, let's remember who we are. You know, we're the social service organization in this area. We have 10 departments and another 4 to 6 smaller departments that are providing services through the county's charter. We're a healthcare company, we're a public safety agency, we're a library system, and so forth. So why do we do what we do and who we are is the start of that. And then what are we working on? Reducing, and the goal being eliminating homelessness in the communities that we serve, helping people to return to health that don't have other options, helping people become productive members of society that might have committed a crime, been incarcerated or in some program, and want to remain outside of the incarceration system, outside of jail. Right? Those are the things that we do. And then measuring those through some outcomes. And so the second piece that I think we're starting to wrestle with is this outcomes orientation. So what are the outcomes? How are we going to measure our success? And then we've always had a set of behavior standards. It's embodied in the personnel policies, right? A respectful workplace. You can be angry about something, but you can't lash out. There are certain behavioral norms that are expected, right? We are a workplace that doesn't tolerate what I hear out of my 13 and 15-year-old all the time. This cursing thing that has manifested itself in society. I don't know how I'm going to deal with all of that, but I shut it down every time I hear it. You can do it with your friends for whatever reason you need to, but in my presence and with other adults, you're not going to. It's just a norm that we're going to have. Well, my friends get to do it. Well, they're not my kids, right? And so the county has always had a set of behavioral norms around what's expected in a respectful workplace between each other, between the public and the services that we provide, between the vendors, the partners, the people that we work with. And so some of those have now been embodied in these 10 competencies. And what I find great about it is that those competencies align to the county's values. Those competencies include things like navigating change, communication. And then what got added is this aspect of promoting equity and racial justice. And as I've been in team meetings and as I've talked to folks, what I hear is 8 of them are pretty easy, pretty straightforward. I get it. These other 2 are really tough, and they've been added, and I'm not sure what they mean. And I've been in settings with leaders from the various organizations saying, I'll share one. I was asked, Bob, am I responsible for teaching what white privilege means? Right? Because that's built in to one of the competencies. And I think that this is the stuff that we're wrestling with. And it's really hard and really difficult. My answer to that was, I don't think you're accountable for teaching white privilege, right? That is something that you have dealt with. That's a core thing for you. But as a leader, if your team would benefit from a conversation, facilitated or otherwise, or from some training, or for some reference materials, or historical context, as a leader, you are accountable for turning to and bringing those resources to bear if that's something that your team would benefit from. And so my answer wasn't that you're accountable for teaching what white privilege means, because that's going to come through your own lens. If you're at a place where you're comfortable with your team, where you feel that you can share your perspective and create the safety so that people could share their perspective, that would be tremendous. But I'm not sure all the teams are ready for that or in a place to be able to do that. And so I think what I see as I've talked with folks and as I'm listening is the competency model is coming to light as something that's really difficult and really hard. And I agree. It's difficult for me too in some of these conversations. But it is a part of what the county has decided it's taking on. It is an outcome from the Workforce Equity Strategic Plan work. It is an aspect that we can do our best work through a set of norms and values and behaviors that are rooted in these competencies. And so we've got to take that work on. And so I think one of the toughest things is, how do you have a really tough conversation? And what I wanted to ask to do this morning is take a little bit of a risk. So here's how I'm going to set this up. I don't want you to turn to a partner and talk about a difficult thing, but I'd like you to turn to your partner and talk about when you have recently faced a difficult situation, how do you go about taking a step to talk about that. Not the thing itself, but what do you activate? What skills do you use? What's the first next step that you take when faced with something difficult? So think about something that's happened to you recently. It could be anything, right? My 13-year-old cursing in front of a friend of mine who says, "You let them talk like that?" Right? That was a difficult thing for me. So what did that activate for me? And how did I go about doing that? And I'd like you to just talk with each other just a couple of minutes, and then maybe share a couple of ideas around that, because we're activating, I think, for many people, a set of skills that they have, but we're activating it in a different way around a topic or a set of topics at work that typically have not been taken on in this kind of way. So think about a situation that was really difficult for you. Turn to a friend or whoever's sitting beside of you, if they don't happen to be a friend necessarily, but talk to the person near you about how you deal with difficult situations. And let's do that for just a couple, 3 minutes. Okay? Okay. Why don't you go ahead and finish up Okay. So I always see these as great learning opportunities, very selfishly for myself, because sometimes these great ideas that come up around, here's how I deal with something, and we've done this exercise several times through this setting. So anyone willing to share what they might have heard in terms of a tactic to use or how you deal with difficult situations? Okay, I'm going to bring the microphone because I don't want to. Yeah, you can just talk to the microphone.
So one thing we talked about was try to understand the perspective of the person, and that goes along with kind of assuming good intent and figuring out, why they did what you perceived was a bad thing or a wrong thing, and then go from there.
Okay, perfect. So gaining perspective of the other individual. Great. Anybody else over here? You want to pass that microphone back up?
We talked a little bit about the mechanical parts of it. If you've had a rough interaction, circling back maybe the next day, hey, can I get 20 minutes on your schedule? I want to touch base again. And then finding a neutral place to have that conversation. You don't want to, I made the joke, you don't want to block someone in their cube and talk about feelings. You want to, find a neutral area, whether it's a meeting room or a walk and talk, a coffee, and then being able to be willing to eat your share of the crow. Like, that was rough because I could have done it better. So how can we kind of circle back so you kind of come from a place of, here's halfway, come meet me.
Great. Okay. Anybody else over here on this side? Okay, that's good. I'll bring the microphone under. Thank you. Anybody on this side? Okay.
Madeline talked about locating the feeling in your body. Like, where is that? Is it the top of your stomach, or is it kind of your forehead, and really being physically present with that feeling? And then I talked about, for me, giving myself permission to fail in the interaction is really important for me to get over the hump of starting it. If I load it with too much, then I avoid it. So giving myself the permission to be human.
Yeah, the only part that I would add is around basically just a distinction. If your cup is full, your cup is full, and no amount of additional trying effort will get around that. Because, like, as a volunteer and a couple other things, like, I work with people who are escalated, and if they're escalated, their faculties are just not there. They can talk, they can do things, but until you're past that point, you just have to let things cool off. And it's also, I just love the distinction, public praise, private feedback, because when you offer feedback in a group setting, it takes on a different connotation, or it can at least. So anyways, check.
Anybody else? Okay, so one of the themes that I'm hearing around the competency work and around the PPR process is that it's generating a lot of conversations that people may not have had in their employment here or in their employment elsewhere. And that may be generating some opportunities for some difficult conversations, some crucial conversations, and so forth. And so what I wanted to share this morning is that the topics that we're talking about may be new, but most of you probably have a reference point to lean on in terms of having had something hard or difficult to talk about. And so all I wanted to do this morning is to make a link between those two. I don't think it's the solution to everything that you may be facing as we make our way through. We have the work that needs to get done, the check the box components, right? It's in your Workday inbox. There's a set of steps to follow. Talent development and HR have done a tremendous amount of work to try and make this as easy as possible, and there are more resources coming. There's a video on how to navigate your way through Workday. The expectation is that these PPR, the planning discussions, are completed between now and the end of September. And so there's some time. I have not done mine with Marisa yet because I am looking for some more resources and some more information so that I can do it as well as I can. But there are dozens, if not hundreds of people that have already gone through the steps in the process. So no one's behind yet because we were given a time frame through the end of September. If you have questions about those next steps, watch for more information coming out. There will be an email that Karen is drafting that's kind of tuned to DCA, should be coming out in the next day or two. It'll have a little bit of a flavor. It was drafted by Talent Development, but the encouragement was, make it our own. We're not the health department. We're not the library. We are who we are. And so there are some things that we want to make sure that we're accounting for as we do that, as we tune the message to our organization. So anyway, thank you for walking through that. I'll just make my way through this list then. In terms of the all staff next week, I think the agenda's pretty much finalized at this point. We may be tweaking some of the timing and things. We're at the Melody Ballroom. We'll have a full day. There's a set of activities. So it's not going to be sitting and just listening to lecture and those sorts of things. There's some planned interactions, table level, from the room to the front of the room, at the front of the room. And so it'll be, I will use the word dynamic, might be a good way to describe it. We do have a couple of guest speakers, so the chair is coming, and we're going to do a mock press conference for that. For those of you who've been through new employee orientation, the DCA version, that's when I've come and the people going through NEO ask me questions pretending to be reporters from various news organizations. I talked to the chair about that. She thought that was a great idea. So she'll have some remarks that she wants to make, and then we're collecting a set of questions that we're going to ask her, and inject a little bit of light levity, I think. I'm always hesitant to say fun because, fun's in the eye of the beholder as well. And so, but we wanted to do something a little different, and she was up for that. Patricia Charles Heathers is also coming. She's the new director for the health department. She and I are getting to know each other through the various venues that we're together in. And she is going to share some aspects of where she believes health in this community is going, and what the county's role in that around total health and those kinds of concepts, where the health department may be going. And since they're over a third of what the county spends its money on, I think that that's going to be pretty helpful in terms of understanding what the expectations are, what those outcomes might look like. So I'm looking forward to that as well. We're going to kind of do that as a little bit of a fireside-ish chat kind of version. I really want to thank the group of employees that are involved in the planning for this. We asked for a group to do the planning so that the leadership team could support what it is that planning group came up with. And so I'm really looking forward to it next week. I think it'll be great. There was a comment that was made yesterday at the facilities management team meeting. They have a year-end celebration today, and then we have the all-staff meeting next Wednesday, and then the DCA picnic is next Saturday. And so it's kind of, 3 events that got scrunched together in a couple-week period, but, that's fine. These things are, you can never plan everything perfectly, and so I think it's great that we'll have 3 opportunities in various venues to get together to talk through DCA, where things are going, what we've done, and come together around that. So in terms of the outcomes, I know that we're trying to put one final communication together around that, kind of specify, here's what we expect out of the all-staff meeting. And so we'll get that out. I don't want to misquote it from what I remember. But in true fashion of getting over a couple hundred people together, it'd be important to understand what were we trying to accomplish, or what was the planning group trying to accomplish that we've supported. And so we'll get that out to everybody soon. Any other questions on the all staff? Did I do an adequate job of kind of outlining what that's going to be? Okay. All right. There's going to be a little bit of, everybody can arrive and sit where they want, and then we're going to mix the group up a little bit. For those of you who were here a couple of years ago, we did that to foster that opportunity to cross-pollinate across the DCA organization. I think we've got a method that we're going to use for that. I wrote down killing the CIO position, so I wasn't aware that we were doing that. The leadership roles are still what they are, so I'm still in an interim role. Because I'm still in an interim role, Tracy's in the interim deputy CIO role. Naomi's in the interim division director role for facilities. Vicky's here. Vicky's in an interim role as the leader of program and project management. As I've said in this venue and other places, these are simply part of the process. It's a tag, right? There are certain rules and guidelines that have to be followed and those sorts of things. I have not, to my sense, let being the interim leader prevent me from facilitating the decision making and leading the department in the direction that I think the county needs us to go. Certainly, I have ideas and thoughts about what we should be doing. I represent a lot of the input that you all provide to me at those venues, in those decision-making meetings, in my one-on-ones with the chair, with Marisa, with the other commissioners, and with my peers. And so all of that is just, it's a function of process to a certain extent. I've indicated my willingness to stay on as long as needed in the interim role, and so there's ongoing discussions about where things are headed. But there's nothing that I can announce today around the titles and the roles. Instead, I just want everybody to continue to focus on getting the work done that needs to get done. And as soon as we're ready or need to make announcements around organizational structures and roles and so forth, we'll do that. So you'll know as soon as we need to get that out. Thanks, Rachel. Alignment with facility and IT. So I'm going to flip this around. I would hope, so here's my challenge. I would hope that no one is waiting on management to say we should figure out how to align the work. You mentioned, Hagan, moves ad changes, and the two different systems, Tririga and ServiceNow, that manage tickets and service requests and those sorts of things. So here's my challenge. If there are opportunities to better coordinate the workflows between the two organizations, call a meeting, whiteboard the process that you want, whiteboard the process that you have, and find out what the next set of improvement opportunities could be. And if you don't get support to do that from management, then ask and then escalate. So I was not thinking about, I wonder how well IT and facilities are working together, because I have an expectation that if there are opportunities to improve that work, then go do that. Go identify them and go do that. And so that I just kind of flip it around to say, if there's a place to do that, then let's do it. And if you don't get support from management, then I certainly want to know about that. If somebody says we don't want to be better, then I want to know about that. Because that's not the spirit of, and I mean that facetiously, but I don't think that's the spirit that we're going to embody as DCA. I am confident we don't do everything perfectly, so let's find opportunities to do better and figure that out. And I'll bridge that over to the IoT, the Internet of Things discussion. Electronic services, Aaron, Jeff, and that group are talking about the proliferation of IoT devices in building services, right? You guys can probably see it as stuff starts chatting on the network. I do think we need a plan around IoT, and I think I'll take today as a takeaway, as a catalyst, to ask for what is the plan around IoT. It's not something that we're we have to figure this out. It's not something that's optional for us, because almost everything these days is coming with some kind of wireless connection, and so we need to account for it. But we need to have a strategy for it. It needs to be informed through security. We need to find out what is our tolerance. We shouldn't be introducing things that could compromise the network, and if we are, then we should stop, no matter what the justification might have been for buying something or not. And so we're accountable for making sure that the day-to-day operations stay functional. So we can say not now. I don't think we can say no or never. We can say not now, but we need to have a plan and we need to have a strategy, and I think it's time to pull that together. Brad?
So, Ed has asked me to facilitate a discussion between facilities and IT around the myriad of things.
Mm-hmm.
The work we've started, and we've initiated, we're facing with alarms. We're already starting to define what is Internet of Things to us.
Yep.
So when we have something, we think, does it fit in the box or is it outside the box? And then we'll forward from there, mainly from a security perspective, and understanding the devices, how we use it, architecture, and how we deploy it, user presence.
Yeah, yeah, that's good to hear. I think, you know, security is one aspect of things. We may need things because the people that provide us with tools and controls for our buildings, you know, so we bought it. We can't not use it, right? An elevator's got to go up and down. A door's got to open. HVAC systems have to function. Those sorts of things. And so security is one aspect. Business need is another. Our vendor choices become another piece of this. Contracts become a part of that, right? Who's accountable if there's a breach on a piece of an IoT device, and those sorts of things. So I think multifaceted, glad to hear it's gotten started. I'll probably be, I'll modify my expectation a little bit to say I'd love to hear about it and get some kind of a briefing around it. Okay. So that connected a bunch of stuff together, I think. After Align, so I think there are two key things that are happening that are going to be pretty big in the overall scheme of things. One is broadband, and we have an effort going on around upgrading and improving what I've called the corporate broadband network. That's the connectivity between all of our own facilities, and we do that in partnership through a franchise agreement with several other jurisdictions. The City of Portland is the provider of that service. Hagan, Rodney, and others are involved in speccing out that work. There's 4 or 5 years worth of work that need to get done. I've roughly estimated that based on what the city has provided us in a $20 million investment range over the next few years. That's influenced by whether we get more partners or fewer partners, who those partners are, what broader plans are. Like TriMet's got this huge plan that has come to light that they're willing to make investments in that wasn't part of the initial plan. And so it's a very dynamic situation, but we are the second largest consumer of that broadband network. And so we have a huge amount of influence and decision-making rights associated with what those plans are. I've asked the city for a briefing, and they're going to come and talk with a small group of leaders here, and then we'll head on down the path of doing something broader, maybe more countywide, or maybe up to and including a board briefing on where things are with the corporate network. Then the next piece is the municipal broadband. And so I did a briefing to the board earlier this year talking about creating a municipal offering in terms of providing broadband internet high-speed connectivity to the public. Over 700 jurisdictions around the country have done this. I'm glad that we've waited because there's 700 examples of how to do it and not do it, right? And so we have commissioned and are working together with the East County cities and the City of Portland a feasibility study. I think that's the next step that needs to get done. There was one done in 2007 that was based on, if you remember, Muni Wi-Fi, right? Putting Wi-Fi repeaters on light poles and those sorts of things. And so we're going to do the feasibility study, and I think that that's going to lay out what the possible paths are to address providing high-speed internet connectivity as an alternative to the commercial providers. And so I'll kind of leave it there because there's a lot of complex things. If anybody wants to talk to me about where municipal broadband is, just reach out and I can talk through that. then budget impacts. And then, Aaron, what I think I'd like is just a summary around the breach and that we can send out to folks. I think it was in a string of emails and it's been recorded in the case, I know, but let's just put that together and we can forward that out.
Yeah, we have a staff FAQ we put together for ADBSD. We could totally send that out.
That's perfect. Yeah, that'd be great. Yeah, and then if people have questions about that, you can reach back out to Aaron or the security team, and they can provide some additional details if needed. Yeah. So then, last thing that I had, I think, on the list is budget impacts. So the state finished passing all their bills that last weekend, that flurry of activity on that Saturday and Sunday. I understand that there are some impacts. They haven't been coalesced together in a communication, but I know that there are impacts to DCJ in terms of some of the services that they provide. There have been some impacts to DCHS, and these are all post the county finishing its budget process. And so there were some, I'm confident there was some aspect of what's the likelihood of this funding not coming through, so that as the county built its budget, it either accounted for a cut in funding or it expected the funding, and now maybe the funding isn't there anymore, and so a second round of budget modifications is being done by the budget team. The health department is also impacted through the continuing care organization models and the funding that flows down through the Affordable Care Act and Medicaid at the state level and those sorts of things. So I think my answer is twofold. One, there's nothing yet that has come to light that causes me to have to respond with anything related to the DCA budgets. So let me put that in place. But, you know, things roll downhill. All of our funding outside of about $2 million comes from the departments. We get about $2 million in general fund. And so that means that if the department budgets are impacted, then, you know, ours could be. But I'm not aware of anything at this point along those lines. And then the second is more to come. I'm confident that there is a process for these budget updates, and that's activated. And so more communications will be coming soon around impacts out in the departments and what that might mean. So I wasn't trying to be evasive in my answer, just tell you what I know, and more to come. So with that, we're at 5 minutes till. I really appreciate everybody coming down today and look forward to seeing you next time. Thank you. Yeah, I saw that.
Yeah, okay.
Are they short?
Surprises me.